Winning!
You probably have to toggle back and forth between them to check comments, but sounds off.
All right.
Cool. So we're going to talk about all things jumping. What was the first topic we wanted to cover or answer?
So a couple of these are questions that we had come in this week, and some of them are just things that we have noticed a lot of our clients ask similar questions. So we thought it pertinent to cover that. So first, what are some things that you should not do if your dog is jumping?
Ooh, that's a good one. So I think it goes back to the root question of why. Why do dogs jump in the first place? What possesses them to jump? And especially when they're bigger, because it's so much, it hurts. It hurts a lot more than if they're just 5 pounds. So why do dogs jump? Well, if you think about dogs and their pack formations, pack families, pack lives, right? They live in a pack. They're not solitary creatures. So they're used to always having that surrounding of other animals or people in their human pack. So dogs are one of the few animals that will die in solitary confinement. If they have absolutely no interaction with any person or any other dog, they get kennel crazy and they just die from loneliness. I don't know if you've heard or read articles about kids in orphanages, babies specifically. They just pass away if they don't have somebody to hold them and love them. And so that's how dogs are. They're just social creatures, and they need that love and attention. So, jumping. Why do they jump? Because they want your attention. It's not a bad reason to jump. Wanting attention isn't bad, but the act of jumping is. So when you think about why, the why before the what, why are they doing it? It's because they want your attention. So then we have to think, okay, attention's good. Wanting our attention, needing our attention, that's not just a want, it's a need that they have. How can we give that need to them without them having to demand it through jumping? And so we start to teach proper alternatives, right? So instead of jumping to get our attention, how else could a dog ask to get our attention?
They could spin, or they could just sit.
Sitting's a more typical option. And it's really, if you think about it, if you go to someone's house and they have a really well-behaved dog that just sits at your feet, how can you not reach down and touch it? Like, you just have to pet it. Like, what a good job. You're being so polite. So teaching them that having manners and being respectful is actually the best way to get attention will make them want to be more proactive in sitting instead of jumping to demand it. Sorry, it's got a little notification. I think we're still live. Do you want to check? It said we had changes. I didn't change anything. I've just been talking. Anywho, my tech guy's on it. I'll let her fix that. So why are they jumping? To get attention. How else could they get attention? By sitting. So when a dog jumps, you have to have a effective correction. A correction should not be something that is fear-based or painful, but something that stops or interrupts the behavior, like jumping, and then redirect them, that proper alternative. What should they be doing? Sitting. And then once they're sitting and their bottom's on the ground, immediately reaching down to pet them or praising them, good boy, good girl, and if they jump, stop. Effective correction, whatever gets them back down on the ground. Sometimes just stopping does, and that's an effective correction. Other dogs are a little pushier, and they'll be like, oh, you don't see me jumping? Let me jump a little harder, or let me add a nip to it. And so for those dogs, you can have a leash on them that just drags throughout the house. So if they jump, you can pull that leash back and away from you. As a little tug on the leash to pull them off and down. And then they don't know that correction is coming from you per se, because your hands have not touched the dog. So little leash pop to pull them away and off, and then having them sit, reminding them sit. Once they sit, petting. So did I answer that?
I think so.
I think I got off on a minor tangent, but I think I pulled it all around.
So how long do you think it would take before your dog started to understand that for attention, rather than jumping on you, they need to sit?
So if you only correct your dog when he is jumping, how do I want to say that? if you're only correcting the problem when it's happening and you're not prepared to fix it, it's going to take a while. But be proactive. Dogs are creatures of habit. If you make a new habit for them, they'll learn much faster. So what I mean by that is pick 5, 10, 15 minutes several times a day to play a game with your dogs. And you can involve your kids if they're big enough, spouses, friends. And what me and my husband did when we had our first pit bull puppy, who was a bad jumper. He was playful. He wasn't mean. He was just so excited to see people. We went out in the backyard and we literally just ran back and forth and called him like, "Hey buddy, hey, come here." And we never said jump. We never like tapped up. But we would just bait him. So we had toys in our hands. We'd have like a little treat bag that we would shake, and we'd hold it above our head. So of course he'd want to jump. And we could either step on that leash when he ran up to us. So if he jumped, he kind of stopped himself. And then we'd say sit, and he'd sit. And then we'd pet him or give him the toy or give him the treat. And then Eric would run the opposite direction and call, Corbin would go chasing, and he'd want to jump. And I mean, it literally took us 5 minutes. And then he was like skidding to a sit, like, I'm not gonna jump. I know that doesn't work. I'm gonna sit right now. Just give me whatever it is. And we just did that for a few days, and that pretty much took care of it. When you have company over, dogs know people, company, guests are new. The rules might be different for them, and so they might try jumping with them. And that's where, again, being proactive, just picking a day. Is football season about to start, or has it?
The last game of the professional season is this Sunday. It's the Super Bowl, Chris.
So you guys have a prime opportunity. Have a Super Bowl party.
Super Bowl party. Chalk it up for dog training.
We obviously don't watch sports, but we would have little like get-togethers with whatever sports season was on. We'd say we'd supply the food and the beer. Just show up at this time. We'd have them show up at 15-minute intervals, and we did this with like 4 or 5 people coming. By the 3rd or 4th person, my dog wouldn't even try jumping. They're just like, "Hey, come on in. So I already had like 3 people here today, so it's not even exciting anymore." And then he'd get a lot of praise for not jumping because he made the right choice of being having manners, being respectful. So we'd have our company, get down on their hands and knees and love on him and give him kisses and highly reward him for that proper choice. So it can go as fast or slow as you are actively involved in it.
So it kind of depends on how consistent and how intentional you are with practicing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Cool. Why does it matter if my dog jumps?
It doesn't. It just hurts sometimes. That's really why. If you don't mind your dogs jumping, okay. Your company might, but it's not their dog, it's yours. So, and if your dog's respectful, I would say if your dog's aggressively jumping, like jumping and nipping, then it matters because he could hurt somebody. Or if you have a larger breed, and you want to be respectful to your community and your family, and you have little cousins or nieces or friends that come over, and your dog could jump on them and hurt them just because dog size and small child size, then it would matter. But, I don't care if you don't care. We let our dogs jump by command only. So when I clean house, I always have music on, and my pit bull Castor, who just passed away this past Thanksgiving, he was my dance partner. And anytime I'd have that music on, he would get this little prance and like kind of follow me throughout the house. Like, "Hey mom, do you want to let me jump?" Because we would dance together. And so if I'd say up, he would come up and we'd jump, and or he'd jump on me and we'd dance and just hang out while I was cleaning. He actually loved the sweeper. It was so weird. He would sit, if I was vacuuming, he would sit right in front of it. So I'd be like hitting him with the vacuum, like, "Move, I'm trying to sweep." And he's like, "Hey, do you want to dance?"
Interesting character, that one.
Yeah, he was a hoot. So it's up to you. It's personal preference. We have clients that bring their dogs to us for training who don't care about jumping, and we're like, okay, cool, we won't worry about it. We have some that care about it sometimes and not others, so we make it by permission only. So if we say up or jump, they can jump, but if we don't say those 2 magic words, not jumping, not allowed, and then they get a correction for it because it was not an appropriate time. So if you have your Sunday best on, or you're carrying a car seat and a diaper bag and keys and a phone, that's not a good time to jump. Or if you have groceries, not a good time to jump. But if you come home and you miss your dog and you've got nothing on you, you don't care about your clothes, you can be like, "Hey, come on up," and invite them up. But they have to wait for that permission.
Yeah, that was another one of our questions. Is it okay sometimes? So
there you go.
So that makes me, So sometimes I think people think that this just came to me. Sometimes people think that it's okay if their dog jumps because they're just a young puppy, like they're
point.
really young. So, well, what's it matter? You know?
We're kind of guilty of something similar. Our Mastiff, she's very small for a Mastiff. She's 100 pounds, and when she was a baby, we let her lay on our laps because she was cute and squishy and had lots of flab on her. And so we were like, we'll just train her, because we're trainers. We'll just train her to not do it when she's bigger. We still struggle with it. She will literally, gently, but lean on people enough to kind of, when they squat down to pet her, she'll just kind of bump them so they'll fall into their bottom, and then she'll just lay on their lap. Okay, all 100 pounds of her. So we be careful what you let be permissive now, because you are raising a dog, not a puppy. Your puppy's only a puppy for a short period of time. Your dog will be your dog forever. So whatever rules you want to enforce now, start now, even if they're cute. And that's where you can get into the sometimes, or always, not sometimes. There's 2 words you can't teach a dog: sometimes and maybe. It's not okay sometimes that you can jump on me, and then other times I'm going to yell at you. That's not okay. But it is okay to say you're always allowed to jump if I give you permission first, but never if I don't say those 2, one magic word, whatever your house is. Some people say jumping, some people say up. It doesn't have to be both. Just pick one. But sometimes or maybe are 2 words you can't teach a dog, so it has to be consistent. I feel like I got off on a tangent. What was the question?
Those are good points, though. Good applicable points. Is it okay sometimes? So we were talking about letting
puppies jump,
young puppies.
So that's when you can do always. You're allowed to jump always when I give you permission, or never when you don't have permission, because they will remember it. Puppies age much quicker than children do. So by 6 months, a puppy is considered an adult dog mentally. Even though their size may not be physically developed, mentally they have the conscience of an adult and can have understanding of rules and guidelines and boundaries. And they often squeeze by with the people perceiving them as still puppies, and so the dogs kind of milk that for a long time and get away with a lot of naughty behaviors, kind of cementing them into habits. What does that mean?
Milk. They're milking it.
Oh my goodness. we do sign language with our babies, and that's the sign.
I know that one.
We know that. We know food really well. I remember banana. That's an easy one. And no. We use that a no. No, we use that a lot. But side notes, yes, puppies are very smart. They grow up very quickly, and then they become conniving teenagers who will push those limits and boundaries. So be careful for what you what you permit now, because it will continue as your puppy ages.
Not that we need to get into too deep of details, but what age range is like the teenage years?
So teenage years, if you go to any shelter, the majority of dogs that are going to be in that shelter are between, the youngest will be about 6 to 8 months, all the way up through 1.5 to 2 years. And that's the teenage years. And a lot of people think, well, if I just bear with my dog for that time, then after 2 years, they'll be perfect. No, without boundaries and guidelines and rules matter.
Rules matter.
Then your puppy will think that those things are okay, and that he's or she is the top dog of the house. By top dog, I mean like above the humans in the house, and they will always do those things. So most people surrender their dogs at that point because they don't know what else to do. Like, nobody really likes teenagers. And when your dog becomes a teenager, it's sometimes hard to love them when they're doing things like jumping from a big dog that it's not meant to hurt or cause harm, but it does. And if you are so flabbergasted and you don't know how to make it stop, you just can't live with that dog. So between 6 to 8 months, all the way up to a year, 1.5 years is the teenage years. And that's when your dog is going to test those limits. The motto for that time span for your dog is, what are you going to do about it? And they just keep pushing it.
I think the teenage years would be a good future topic.
So many. Like, we would need like a month's Facebook Lives to cover that one.
I think they'll allow us to do a live broadcast for, what is it, like 4
hours?
4 hours.
4 hours. Who wants to sit for 4 hours as we talk about teenage dogs and all the joys and pains?
If anyone raises their hand and says they'll be here for all 4 hours, we'll think about doing it, but I don't know if I'll believe you. So we'll just think about it.
You would say that, and then after like 30 minutes, you'd be like, screw this, I'm out of here. And we'd be left talking to nobody for 3.5 hours.
If someone raises their hands, we will actually think about it. I'll commit to that. Okay, so if I've got a dog that jumps, how do I stop it? So you gave us, I think you've already given us one good suggestion for how to stop it, but is there any other
so many ways,
so many different ways?
We're
gonna be here for 4 hours, I assure you.
I love dog training, and that dogs are so unique. It doesn't matter their breed, it does not matter their size, it does not really matter their age. They all have a personality, and so finding that personality and finding what works for that dog is how you're going to learn how to stop them from jumping. So just like children, we have 3 kids, a 5-year-old, a 4-year-old, and an almost 2-year-old. And they're all so different. It's not fair to discipline them all the same, to reward them all the same, because they don't all have the same aspirations. They don't have the same, I don't know, what's the word I'm going for? Responses. So for example,
love languages.
Yeah, if you've read the
personality types, there's so many different languages, layers.
My son is physical touch. That's his love language. So if we have to, when he was a toddler, he's 4 now, so still kind of a toddler. But if we have to swat his bottom, we have to hug him before and after, because this is not us saying we don't love you. This is saying that you made a very bad choice that was very unsafe, like running towards the street. And I want you to think twice before you try to do that again. But we have to hug him before and after, because that's his love language, and he needs to know that we still love him. Our oldest is words of affirmation. So if she scares me with her behavior, like if I think she almost hurt one of her siblings or something, like my response is always like, "What are you doing? Stop!" And she'll just start crying. That was too much for her. So we have to be careful. Like,
but if we spank her, sometimes she just goes,
that didn't hurt.
Yeah.
And it's like, wow.
So
okay,
totally
how else
different
can
effect.
how you have to find out how to speak to them. What is their language? What way do they communicate? What's going to mean the most to them? And then that's how you can praise them and build on that. So for Alaska, I always call out those awesome things she did and just praise her, like, wow, you're such a great big sister. Wow, you're so smart. You can read already. And then with Raider, it's hugging. When he does something really special, it's like, Raider, come here. Dad does high fives. I do hugs. And I just give him a big hug. He's Raider's learning the explosion. But you just have to know how to praise them. So going back to dogs, there are so many ways to interrupt or stop a behavior, but it really only matters how your dog perceives it. So, for example, we used to use the little compressed air cans to clean off your keyboards. We didn't spray them directly at the dog. They were just sprayed at our sides. And just that sound was enough to make your dog go, "What was that?" And you're like, "Hey," excuse me, I think a burp came out. "Hey, thanks for asking. Sit." And then your dog can clearly hear you, versus if he's jumping, he's like, "Hey, hey, 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 hey." And if you're trying to talk, he's not going to hear you because he's, "Hey, hey, hey, hey." So you have to interrupt the behavior. What's the sound? And he's like, "Hey, what?" You can say, "Hey, now that you're looking at me, can you sit? Thanks." And then give him, that loving, that, hugs and kisses, petting, whatever he needs to feel good for the proper alternative. So the air cans worked for some dogs, and then other dogs, it was too much. It was almost abusive. Our pit bull caster, who would almost get ran over by this, like, I've literally sucked his tail into the sweeper before because he would just sit there and he'd look at me like, "That was weird," and he'd pull his tail out and walk away. But he was never afraid. But if he'd hear that air can spritz, you didn't see the air can, you didn't have to be in the same room. He would go sit in his cage the rest of the day. Like, it took a lot of bribing and coaxing to get him to come out, because he's like, "It's not safe out there. There's random sounds. I don't understand." So it really just depends. Our Mastiff, Morgan, you'd spray the air can. You could, like, spray it not at her, but, like, right next to her, and she wouldn't even wake up. It doesn't have no meaning to her. So my point is, you have to find what works for your dog. So a couple options or ideas to try. The compressed air can. Don't get, like, the large economy size ones from Walmart, because we don't want your dog to respect the can. That's how big they are. They're this big. Don't get that. They're cheaper. I know they're cheaper, but that's not what we want. We want the small, compact ones so that you can kind of hide them. We don't want the dog to know that the can is in charge. We want them to know that you're in charge. And these are what we call correction enhancers. I just want them to enhance your no. When you say no, it doesn't mean run away and be afraid. When you say no, it means look to me, because I'm going to tell you what you should be doing instead. I'm going to give you a proper alternative so that I can praise you and reward you for it. So when we say no to our dogs now, like, they don't run away. They actually look up at us like, okay, yeah, tell me. And we can tell them what to do. So it's beautiful. You don't have to get off the couch. It's fabulous. But you have to prime the no. You have to teach what no means. So correction enhancer could be an air can, could be a jar of coins, or like a can of marbles or something.
I think they make something in the pet industry called a pet convincer, right? Which is the same concept as the
yeah,
air can.
and it's smaller, a lot more expensive, but it's very effective. That works.
So if you have one of those, that's essentially the same thing that we're talking about.
You probably buy that at pet store or Amazon too.
Paid more than we would recommend.
Yeah.
That's it.
But I mean, it's a pretty cool looking thing, and it fits in your pocket much easier than an air can, so it's totally worth it.
Depends how much you're going to use it, I guess.
Yeah. Leash pops. So like I mentioned before, you can have the leash on, just dragging behind them, and if your dog comes up to you, just step on the leash. So if they jump, they kind of stop themselves and self-correct, or you can take the leash and pull off and away from you. You absolutely don't want to use your hands, and this is so hard for humans. It's so hard because we just instinctively want to push them off and say, get off. But what we're doing is rewarding them. Your hands, if you think about your hands and what they represent in touch, it's a very comforting touch. Even if you're pushing them off, it's not offensive to your dog at all. And so when you think about what do you use your hands for, you use them to caress people, right? Like my son, when he comes up to give me a hug, I sandwich his cheeks in my hands, kind of make his lips pucker because it's cute. And I give him a hug. For him, that hand represents so much. Just putting my hand on his shoulder and telling him, Raider, I am so proud of you. Like, that means so much to him. Using, use your hands, like, for a loved one when you talk to them or build that relationship. So hands are like, it's the stupidest analogy I have, but they kind of represent like that liquid love, right? Like anything you touch with your hands, you're kind of placing your love and your just your love for them. So pushing them off with your hands, not a good idea. But you do need to get them off. Sometimes you don't have a leash on. Sometimes you don't have a correction tool in your hand. And so how do you do that? You can use like your elbow or your shoulder or your arm and just kind of brush them off. So you're not like elbowing them. Don't do that. That's mean. But just kind of swiping them off. And because, remember going back to the beginning, why dogs jump, they are social creatures, right? They need that love and affection. So by just taking your arm and swooping them off, there's not a whole lot of love given in that. And so they are going to be a little concerned. Like, why did you just do that? Like, that really matters to me that you did that. And I don't like it. That's kind of the point of a correction, right? They shouldn't like it. So then you can have them sit, what they should be doing to get that attention. And as soon as they're sitting, then give them the hands and swoop your little faces and do everything you do to make them feel loved. But do not give them that love while they are jumping. That's why it's so hard for dogs to get why you don't want them to jump, because you're still loving them as you're pushing them down. They're like, hey, this is fun. Even if you love them really hard and you're like, get down, they're like, you still loved me though, just a little bit more aggressive than I needed. But they don't perceive it that way. So don't use your hands. Use your arm. You can kind of use your legs and kind of bounce them off or swipe them off. But yeah, don't use your hands. What other options? If you have remote trainers and your dog has been properly conditioned to them, remote trainers are like a cell phone, right? Remember we said that most dogs that go to the shelters or come to us for training are between those teenage years. How do you talk to a teenager nowadays? You text them and you say, hey, look up, I'm trying to talk to you. Huh? Hey, thanks for looking at me, the human, and not your phone. I was talking to you, you just didn't hear me, right? And that's how you communicate with teenagers nowadays. So it makes sense that dogs, since they go through the teenage years, would have this similar lack of focus or attention span. So with the e-collar, you can give them a little tickle on their neck, that's us calling them, and says, hey, look up. And when they look up, it means, hey, I'm going to ask you to do something for me. So it's not a correction tool per se, but it's a communication tool. Just like your cell phone can bring lots of good news, your cell phone can bring really bad news. And so the e-collar is just a cell phone. It's just a tool. And the tool is not bad, but how we use the tool, how some people use the tool can be. But we just use it for that cell phone, right? That communication of while they're jumping, just pushing that button so they get this little tickle in their leg. Like, hey, what's that? Hey, now that you stopped jumping and you looked at me, can you sit? Oh, what a good sit. Now let me love on you. So the e-collar can definitely work, but I would not use it unless your dog has been properly conditioned to it. It has a language of its own, and it's not fair to just put it on a dog and start speaking a foreign language to them, like Spanish or French, and expecting them to understand, and then you're getting more aggressive with your Spanish and French, and they're not understanding, and they're like, I don't know what you want, and you're just yelling at them in this different language. That's not fair. So you have to teach them what the e-collar means first before we use it, so that there's no confusion and there's no stress.
That's a lot of ideas.
Yeah, lots of, I mean, the list goes on and on. You know, it just depends on what your dog's personality is, what his love language is, and then helping that show them how to get that love language from you and how to not give things that don't represent that love in your relationship.
So let's try to quickly recap.
Oh, I don't even remember what the first question was.
So basically, I'm just going to recap the stuff that I remember.
Okay, he can recap, and I'll chime in if I remember.
So basically, we don't want to let our dogs jump uninvited unless we just don't care at all and want
which is fine if that's okay
yeah.
with you. We have no issues with that. Jumping's not
but
bad.
If,
it just can be.
If at any time you don't want your dog to jump, then you want to name that so you can only have them jump when you say it's okay, basically. Mm-hmm. And if they're jumping, you don't want to give them any love or praise while they're doing that.
Yep, no hands.
You want to wait till they do something that's more appropriate, like either sit or stand or whatever it is that you're going to do.
It's much quicker to slip from a stand to a jump, but it's harder to get from a sit to a stand to a jump. So sitting's a little safer.
That's true. Easier. It's a little harder to spring up from a sit.
Some dogs can, and they are quite talented, but most dogs cannot. It just takes a little bit more effort.
So hold back on the love until they stop jumping. Wait till they sit,
behavior.
And then we want to make sure that we give them some sort of affection or love to tell them that.
That's why we get dogs, to love them.
That when they sit, that's what we wanted. Mm-hmm. So to kind of reinforce that, yes, you are doing fabulous. That's exactly what we wanted.
Yes, it is. Any questions? Do you want to check? You probably have to refresh the page.
Refresh the page.
So if you guys have questions and you haven't posted them, we will give you a few more minutes because sometimes there's a lag in getting the questions to us, and then we will get out of your hair. So none there.
Yeah.
What about that?
I don't think so, but I'm not like super good at this. So how about if there are any questions, go ahead and post them, and we'll respond in this manner today.
Text. Well, we'll send you a text response.
Yeah.
Words, because
words matter.
That's a good one. Hey, and don't forget, somebody's got to know.
What are we referencing?
Rules matter.
Rules matter.
Post it below. Bye, guys. I'm Crystal. This is Eric from the Dog Psychology and Training Center. If you have not yet, please subscribe. And if you don't know what that means, watch previous videos.
I told you it was going to stick.
It did stick. I told him it wouldn't, but it did. So subscribe. It's either up in this corner or this corner.
It's in a corner.
Either corner.
Somewhere.
And subscribe so you can get notified when we go live again. If you haven't, like our page. And if you have any questions, post below.
Yeah.
Peace out. Fist bump.